I'll talk today a little bit about growing lettuce. Now, I grow a variety of different kinds of lettuce, but most of my lettuce that I grow these days are going to be the loose lettuce leaves and mostly the butter crunch type and the red leaf type lettuce. But in the past, I've grown iceberg lettuce and romaine lettuce. Now, typically for most of you, you'll start early in the growing season after all frost has been gone. And with lettuce being a cool season crop, you either grow it in the springtime or you'll grow it in the fall. I typically, if I'm doing it in a raised bed in pots or I'm doing it in my garden, I'm going to go ahead and sow the seeds directly into the soil. I'll plant approximately about 10 seeds per square foot space, and I'll space my rows about 12 inches apart. Now, of course, I'll go ahead and thin them out as they get bigger, but usually when you order or buy lettuce seeds, you get quite a few in a packet. Now, the reason why the lettuce that I'm growing right now in the far left in the buckets and in the far right in the 6-inch tray, and I'm growing them in a dense compartment and doing basically a bunch growing system is I'm growing them in perlite, which is a soilless medium. And because of that, it attracts far less bugs. Plus, I can also cover my lettuce. And so by growing them in the type of containers I have and they're movable, I'm not dealing with as many insect problems and bug problems, plus rabbits and other rodents that will eat the lettuce. And so I'm able to grow them in a dense space and not have kind of the caterpillar, the bugs, the insects, rabbits getting at it. Now, once you go ahead and you plant your seedlings, you'll go ahead and thin them out if they're in a raised bed or in a garden space. With thin leaf lettuce, you're going to go ahead and put the seedlings about 4 inches apart. With romaine, the seedlings need about 6 to 8 inches between each plant. Now, lettuce is a cool season crop, and so I start mine after all frost. Chances of frost are gone. I do grow my lettuce in succession growing, so every 2 weeks I plant more, so I have a continuous supply of lettuce. Now, of course, as we get into the summer months and it gets really hot, I'll grow my lettuce a little bit differently because I'm moving my garden around by growing it in pots and containers. I can go ahead and move them into areas that aren't quite as hot. Also, if I wanted to grow them in pots, it wouldn't be too hard because on the side of my house, between my neighbor's house and my house, I get partial shade during the midday hot sun. And with a tree in the way, it kind of covers and gives me partial shade. And so lettuce actually goes pretty well in between my neighbor's house and my house. And so if you have a spot like that, you'll be able to grow your lettuce even in the middle of the summer. Now, the seeds will germinate in about as little as 40-degree weather to as much as maybe 85 degrees, 80 to 85 degrees. Lettuce does need full sun. If you can give it direct sun about 6 to 8 hours per day, it's great. But I've also had lettuce grow in partially shaded areas where it's only getting about 4 hours of sun. And so it goes a little bit slower, but it is possible. Because it's a cool season crop, I'd rather have it on the cool side and the shadier side if I'm growing it in the middle of the hottest part of the summer. Now, lettuce thrives, of course, in the best temperatures, which is between 60 and 70 degrees. Once it gets be higher than 70 degrees or it gets lower than 60 degrees, it doesn't quite grow as quickly or as well. But I grow my lettuce in the middle of the summer. I just make sure to monitor it and pay close attention to it, and I'm still able to have lettuce for lunch and dinners throughout the growing season. Now, although lettuce is a cool weather plant, whether it's leaf lettuce, romaine lettuce, or butter lettuce, as soon as the soil can be worked, you can go ahead and plant your lettuce seeds because your lettuce seeds will germinate as low as 40 degrees. Now, I do succession growing, so I plant every 2 weeks, like I said. And in order to prevent bolting of my lettuce where it flowers, and the lettuce leaves become bitter, I do try to make sure that as I get into hotter weather periods of time that I either cover my lettuce or I move the buckets and the trays into other portions of my garden area. Now, for those of you who plant it in a flower bed, a raised bed, or in specific garden area that's getting full sun. Of course, in the summertime, you're not going to be able to move your plants, but you could also do some things like put a covering, right? So I bought a tarp that's basically a blueberry tarp, and I can lay that on top of the lettuce, and it'll shield it from the direct sun, and it'll kind of give it partial shade even on a sunny day. Now, the one thing that you want to do is to keep it from bolting. So what I typically do with my lettuce is I keep on doing the cut and grow method, which basically means with this butter crunch lettuce on the right and the lettuce and the red leaf lettuce on the left, I just keep on chopping it down every single time I want a meal. And so once it gets to a few inches to as much as 6 inches tall, I chop it off and let it keep on growing back again. I usually go ahead and will let my lettuce grow to maturity, so I'll have the seeds later on at the end of the summer, and that way I can go ahead and have seeds for the following year. Now, when it comes to head lettuce, so what I mean is romaine lettuce and iceberg lettuce, you're going to need a little more space on that. Now, the one thing that I did have problems with in previous years when I did grow the head lettuce was that when I grew it in soil, you're going to attract a lot more bugs and insects. You'll get slugs, you'll get rabbits, you'll get rodents, and you'll get infestations of bugs. And sometimes they'll come very quickly, meaning like you may not have a bunch of insects on it one day, and then all of a sudden you'll come out in the morning and they'll have eaten the lettuce down to the stub. So I would recommend as soon as possible you go ahead and cover your lettuce if you're growing from seedlings, or you're going to go ahead and try to form the head. So I use these paint gallon bags. And then also, you know how when you go to weddings in the summertime, they have jewelry bags, like the 1 foot jewelry bags. What I would do is order some jewelry bags and then go ahead and use them when the seedlings are just maturing and cover your lettuce. Also, another thing you can do is use a tarp, or you can go ahead and use neem oil. You can barricade your lettuce so that way the rabbits don't get through. If I grew my lettuce in my raised bed in the backyard, I would have rabbits and slugs and insects, and so I would have to make sure I have preventative measures to make sure they don't get at that, because all it takes is one evening in the middle of the night or first thing in the morning. I've come out before and seen an iceberg lettuce that was just in its mid-sized growth stage, where a few insects came and they end up calling their friends over. Before you know it, you have thousands of it, tiny little bugs just eating away at your lettuce, and they'll eat it all the way down to the stub. Now, the ideal growing locations, growing periods are of course in the spring and in the fall. You can grow it in the summer. Just make sure you're in a shady location. Something that gets a good breeze is nice. And then once it becomes cooler, of course, I'll grow additional lettuce because it's a cool season crop. So I'll grow a bunch more as we get into the later summers and the weather starts turning a little bit. Now, lettuce is a type of vegetable that does not like acidic soil. So do not add anything that you would add to your blueberries or citrus plants, because they're very sensitive to low pH, so they're more alkaline. So if you can keep it above 6.5, above 7, that would be perfectly fine. It doesn't take a lot of work to grow lettuce. You'll take the seeds and you'll plant them about a 1/4 inch to 1/2 inch deep. They have very shallow root systems, so that's probably why I can go ahead and get away with putting it in about a 6-inch container. Now, there are some lettuces that will grow deeper roots in non-compact soil, but for the most part, most lettuces grow a shallow root system, 6 inches or so, and you can go ahead and sow them directly into the ground. Now, I usually, when I did plant my lettuce in my garden or in my raised bed, I would plant approximately 10 seeds per foot. I would space my rows about 12 inches apart. With thin type leaf type lettuce like the butter crunch and the red leaf lettuce, you can go ahead and have the seedlings about 4 inches apart. If you're growing it like I am in perlite or in buckets or in containers where you can go ahead and keep them off the ground, slugs won't get at them, rabbits won't get at them, then you can go ahead and especially because I'm growing it in a soilless medium, right? So if you grow it in non-soil, you attract far less bugs and slugs. Mostly it's the bug issue. And because I'm getting far less bugs in it, I can go ahead and just jam pack them in there and do a basically bunch growing. Now, that's the part of the reason why I grew it in the buckets. Although this 5 gallon bucket is more than 6 inches deep, I think it's probably more like 15 to 18 inches high. The reason is I can go ahead and cover the tops, but I also keep the rabbits away along with the slugs away. And so because I'm growing in a deeper container in a soilless medium, I can go ahead and bunch them together, because when you bunch your vegetables together and you do compact growing, the one thing that attracts a lot of bugs, and they end up hiding out in your garden, and then they'll eat away at your garden. So that's why it's critical. If you're going to do bunch gardening and growing in your soil, you've got to really monitor it. Possibly use neem oil sprayed on a regular basis. Go ahead and barricade it off and bag it off and cover it with garden covering, so that way you can keep the bugs away. With lettuce, they attract bugs a lot easier than they do versus let's say like tomatoes or peppers, right? And so because lettuce is such a easy target for insects, it's really important if you do grow it in soil to kind of give it a space, give it aeration, be able to monitor the bugs landing on it. I did used to spray my lettuce with neem oil spray on a regular basis when it was in my raised bed. And just monitoring is very important. I do like using these strainer bags just because I can cover my lettuce and keep the tops away. And once you have kind of a bug problem, it's hard to get rid of it. So being very due diligent and trying to prevent it from the beginning is very important. Now, when it comes to iceberg and romaine lettuce, I did start the seedlings indoors. They tend to grow pretty well at the beginning by growing them indoors. So I grew them indoors, got the seedlings started. I took 1 foot jewelry bags and put them on top of the lettuce as it was in its kind of premature growing stage, so that way the lettuce head can form without bugs eating away at it. And then because they don't have very deep root systems, I can go ahead and bring them out a little bit later when the weather is enough for leaving out all night. Now, aphids can easily destroy a lettuce patch, so that's why I do very little bunch growing with lettuce in a garden with actual soil. And that's why I like to space it out, not only to give it the space, but also to be able to see what's going on. If I need to spray it down, or if I need to go ahead and lay down some sort of bug killer, I can do that when I space out my garden. Also, leaf curl and wilting is kind of a problem, so make sure you space out your garden well enough. The one thing I don't like about aphids too is they spread a lot of diseases and create mold issues. And if you're doing bunch growing and it's too dense in your raised bed or your garden area, the bugs just hide out and you can never get rid of them. And so that's why spacing out your garden, especially with any type of loose lettuce leaf type lettuces varieties, it's important to do so. You can use horticulture soap and neem oil to help with the infestation problems. Do it as a preventative measure because, like I said before, once you have a problem, it's hard to get rid of them. Plus, they can eat away at your lettuce patch overnight. Slugs, snails, and caterpillars love your lettuce. So make sure before you see a problem that you go ahead and take care of that problem by making sure, if you're going to go ahead and plant lettuce in your raised bed or in pots or in your garden directly, that you take care of making sure that you barricade away any type of slugs or snails that can come in the middle of the night because they can basically ravage your lettuce patch overnight. And so I make sure to do that in my raised bed and my garden bed. But that's a little bit about growing lettuce. One thing great about lettuce too is you can do succession growing. So you can have, I planted mine early, just after the frost period. I planted mine in the early spring. I planted some in the middle of the spring. As we get into the late part of spring, I'll plant some more. Then I'll plant some in the summer, but I'm going to also pick a shady area, someplace between my neighbor's house and my house that gets kind of a little bit of wind tunnel. So it gets a cool breeze coming through there, which is nice. And then there's a big old tree at the end of the walkway, which is nice because it gives it a good shade in the hottest part of the day. And with the type of lettuce I grow, with the butter crunch and the red leaf lettuce, it's a cut and grow method. So I'll cut it down, it'll grow back, and I'll eat it again. And then I'll grow back, I'll cut it again, and it'll grow back again. Now what happens is after about 3 to 5 cuttings, the lettuce the leaves end up getting a little bit bitter. So that's why I went ahead and already started my mid-spring lettuce growing. I went ahead and used a container that's at least 6 inches deep. And because I'm growing it in perlite, I'm going to have less bug problems. But even then, if I was to grow it in, let's say, potting mix, I would make sure that I would go ahead and use this 5-gallon strainer bag, and I can actually slide it from the side, and it will keep the bugs away from that if it's in an area where there's bug problems. What I'll typically do with lettuce, though, is I put it actually on top of an old car that doesn't run anymore. And so what I do is I put it on that old Lexus, that black car that you've probably seen in some of my previous videos. And so by keeping it away from grass and away from dirt, it keeps the bugs away. And it's high enough where I have very few bug problems. Now, I do eat the leaves, and so in the summertime I'll go ahead and keep it covered with the strainer bag because I want to make sure they don't get at any part of my lettuce leaves. And it's the same thing you can do too. If you want to go ahead and use these paint strainer bags or any sort of horticulture bags and coverings, it helps a lot with keeping insects away, and especially with the type of lettuce that loves to eat away at the leaves. So that's a little bit about growing lettuce. If you have additional questions, just go ahead and message me and I'll be glad to answer your questions.